I got another very exciting bottle of whiskey to discuss with everybody again here today. If you've been following the channel for the last year or two, you know that we are big fans of K-Luke whiskey and the various batches that have come out the last couple years. One of my favorite of all the releases has been the Keenan Reserve, which was a K-Luke batch that was finished in Cabernet barrels. Starting in 2025, K-Luke has been releasing more single barrels around the country that were finished in various casks. From my understanding, all in all, there's going to be 12 different releases that will go out to various stores or groups. One of those groups is actually 21090. So keep an eye on and your ear out for the news on that release. Now, what I'm going to get into today is a K-Luke single barrel finished in Armagnac casks, and this one is coming from Liquor Barn in Kentucky. This one comes in at 118.4 proof, and it looks like it was essentially bottled at the end of May. Let me pour the sample in here before we get any further into things. But I found this barrel on a random day when I was hunting in northern Kentucky. One of those days where really I was coming up short across the board, wasn't finding anything interesting, or in general, I'm pretty skeptical to buy anything these days. So much whiskey in the house, combined with our own barrel picks coming out, it does make it harder and harder to buy bottles of whiskey, especially bottles of whiskey just completely sight unseen, just taking a risk on things. But when I saw this on the shelf at Liquor Barn for $120, so essentially the same price as other batches of K-Luke, I had to take the plunge on it, particularly because it was an Armagnac finish, and I really haven't been coming across many Armagnac finishes, and it's one of my favorite finishes. Now, on the back of the bottle, it does give some interesting information because this is called a single barrel, but you do have to be careful with the terminology of what single barrel means. So here's the line on the back that illustrates what I'm saying here. Each K-Luke Whiskey Company cask-finished single barrel is a one-of-a-kind whiskey experience. We create a custom small batch blend of mash bills containing up to 36% rye from Kentucky and Indiana to be secondarily barreled, aged in unique barrels from around the world. Each barrel will be released at cask strength, unfiltered, yada, yada, yada from there. So what this is saying is that the owners of K-Luke, Jonathan and Jennifer Masano, made a custom blend, essentially a custom batch of what they typically release, and then chose that small batch to then put in various finishing casks. Now, one thing I would love to know is if the same base whiskey went into all the different finishing casks that I'm seeing, or if there were multiple blends throughout those casks. As mentioned, I believe there's 12 single barrels that'll be floating out there. So were they all the same from one big batch, or did 3 barrels get this batch, 3 barrels get that batch? Raises all types of questions in my mind. But the fact that this is a base blend of Indiana 36% rye, most likely MGP if we read between the lines, and then another high rye Kentucky bourbon of some sort. Then on top of that, finish in Armagnac. Yes, that's why I took the plunge. So we're going to do a review of this particular cask here today. But just keep in mind, if you can't get to Kentucky and find a Liquor Barn that has this single barrel, there are other K-Luke single barrels that are floating around for the same price. By the end of this, I'm going to answer the question whether I plan to dive into any of the other single barrels I can find. So let's get into this one. We're going to go into the nose, the palate, and then go into a description of the finish. And if you're still here, be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Really does help the channel quite a bit. All right, let's get into this nose. So if you've been watching me give reviews here over the last couple of years, even the fact that I use the bulb glass is usually a good indication of where any given review is going to go, because I tend to only use the bulb glass on these type of tastings where I want to get deeper into the nose than my prior notes. I'm already smiling, by the way, so that's usually a good tip off as well. Haven't even taken a sip yet. I'm just nosing it right now. Absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous nose on this one, though. The balance between the Armagnac and the bourbon is immense right off the start. You get all of that lovely, great characteristics from that Armagnac, but then that bourbon does equal it out. And the bourbon is bringing its own layers of fruits to this equation as well. So you get this pop of like the grape, but then all these underlying berries. And then that's all blended on top of this like lovely custard, even to the point of a creme brulee where you got that charred layer of that sugar on top. Getting deeper into it, there's this buttery pie crust, and you start getting more and more into those baking spices. So, all in all, a very well balanced nose, pulling in aspects of fruit, the sweetness, the baking spice, and then you got the Armagnac and a little bit of oak on top of all that. So, yes, if I'm already that excited about the nose, what's about to happen? So, now let's go in on the taste. Cheers, everybody. Thank you for joining me this far. Whoa, man. Flavor bomb up front. Surprisingly so, there's actually more oak presence up front than I was expecting. But then still, it's that fruit bomb that I was talking about before with that onslaught of the berries and the grape. Then there's quite a bit of rye spice that starts attacking the palate as well. And that transition to mid palate really brings everything I was talking about on the nose. It's a little darker leaning than expected, but still all of that custard and brown sugar, even a little bit of honey starts entering on top of all the fruits we've been talking about all along. Now let's get into the finish. On the finish, the fruits die down, at least initially, and I'm predominantly getting this lingering aspect of honey, rye, and quite a bit of oak. Now, letting it work its course, there is a point about 30 seconds, 45 seconds even into the finish, where the Armagnac takes over and you're left with more of this older oak profile with a little bit of that grape and some vanilla. So it's interesting how it goes in waves throughout that whole experience there and where the finish shows up. All right. Let's get into the final scores, though I think you have a good sense of where this one's going. So here on the channel, we do have a robust scoring system behind the scenes, comprised of a flavor score, an experience score, and a value score. The 10 metrics get aggregated together into the final score, which allows us to see how this whiskey ranks comparatively to other things that we've reviewed. And I feel like I'm going to this well a few times too often in 2025, but yet again, an overwhelmingly great whiskey, and I gave this one a 90 out of 100. Comparatively, that is an incredibly high score. I don't give many of those out throughout the year, though it does seem like lately I've hit a concentrated batch of great whiskeys, and I've been hitting this 90 more often than I typically do. Now, I've been to a few liquor barns, and I see this around me, so go take a look. If you're in Kentucky and find some of these, this is the Armagnac one. But because this one is so good, and it's the base whiskey in and of itself that I think was probably pretty phenomenal. I would have loved to have tasted the base whiskey before it went into these finishing casks to understand what flavors are coming from that finishing cask and a little extra time in the barrel. But this is actually now, I think, my highest reviewed K. Luke bottle yet. So this just inspires me to go out and hunt a few more of these to see if all of the different single barrels and all the different finishing casks are as consistent as this one. Though, as we said off the top, Armagnac is my favorite finish. Hopefully I can get my hands on a sherry one. But tip out there for those that are hunting, I know the price tag is high and you see me rally against price quite a bit sometimes. This is one where I intend to buy a backup for myself, and I've had a few other people already reach out to me and asked me to go to the store and grab them one. So that's about as big of a recommendation as I can give. So thank you, Jonathan and Jennifer, for another great whiskey tasting. I'm gonna go take what's left here and enjoy the heck out of it with the rest of my evening. Thanks for joining, everybody. Thank you for watching. Hello again, whiskey friends, everybody. A big shout out to our amazing Patreon community. If it wasn't for you, we couldn't continue to produce the content and barrel picks week after week. And for everybody else out there, be sure to hit that like and subscribe. It really helps the channel more than you know. And we'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.